Let's talk about one of the most interesting and honestly one of the most argued about forms in fiction, the novella. On the one hand, it's praised by literary masters. On the other, it can be a real headache for publishers. So is it a work of art or just a problem? Well, today we're going to break it all down. What a novella is, how you might write one, and where it really fits in the world of books. So, on one side of the ring, you've got a heavyweight like Ian McKowen. He calls the novella the perfect form of prose fiction. I love this image he uses. It's the beautiful daughter of the novel. What he means is it has all the grace and the power of its parent, the novel. But, without all the baggage. It's lean, it's focused, it's just elegant. And then you've got Stephen King. He calls it an ill-defined and disreputable literary banana republic. And bam, that just perfectly captures the other side of the coin, doesn't it? The novella's reputation for being kind of messy and commercially awkward. It just doesn't fit neatly into those little publishing boxes, which makes it a tough sell. And right there, in those two quotes, you've got the whole paradox: artistic perfection versus a commercial nightmare. So to really get to the bottom of this, to figure out why it has these two dueling reputations, we need to dig in a little deeper. We need to understand what a novella actually is, because I promise you, it's about so much more than just the word count. Okay, but the easiest place to start is, of course, the word count. Officially, for big awards like the Hugo and the Nebula, a novella is anywhere between 17,500 and 40,000 words. So that gives us a nice, concrete range to work with. It's a useful starting point. But like I said, the real soul of the novella, it's not in the length, it's in the structure. What's really, really crucial to get is this idea of structural unity. See, a novella is built around one single central conflict. It doesn't wander off into a bunch of subplots. It keeps its cast of characters small and its timeline tight. Every single thing in the story is there for one reason: to serve a concentrated, intense purpose. And that's where it gets its unique power. And this table, it lays it out perfectly. A short story, that's usually just a snapshot, a single event. A novel can be this huge, sprawling thing that covers generations with a massive cast. But the novella, it sits right in that sweet spot in the middle. It's got the tight focus of a short story, but it gives you enough room for the kind of character depth you'd normally find in a novel, just, on a much more compressed scale. The German literary tradition has a great word for this: the Wendepunkt. It means a single, powerful turning point. The writer Goethe had this incredible way of describing the perfect novella ending. He said it should be as surprising but as organic as the bloom of a flower. Isn't that beautiful? Everything in the story has been quietly building toward this one, final, perfect moment of revelation. Okay, so that's the theory. But how does this help you if you're a writer? How do you actually know if the story you want to tell is a novelle? Well, it turns out some stories just naturally fit this shape. Novellas are absolutely perfect for deep psychological dives into one character, like you see in Death in Venice. They're amazing for exploring a single tough moral question, like in Small Things Like These. And they totally shine in genres like sci-fi and horror, where you want to build and sustain a single intense feeling. I love this. It's a fantastic way to figure it out. We can call it the Goldilocks test. Just ask yourself, is my idea too simple? Something I could wrap up in a single scene? That's probably a short story. Is it too complex? Does it need a bunch of subplots and a huge world? Well, that's a novel. But if your idea is that just right in between, if it needs room to breathe, but it's still built around a single, focused core, then congratulations, you've probably got a novella on your hands. Okay, so you've got the right idea. Now, how do you actually write the thing? The absolute key is to see the novella's constraints not as limits, but as a source of incredible creative power. So here are the core strategies you gotta use. First, you have to commit to that one central conflict. No wandering off. Second, keep your character list lean. Think of it less like a giant oil painting and more like a detailed drawing. And this is so important. Every single scene has to pull double or even triple duty. A scene that builds character also has to move the plot forward and crank up the tension. There's just no room for filler. And really, it all boils down to this fantastic quote from Josh Whale, a National Book Foundation honoree. Focus relentlessly. That's it. That's the mantra. You find the emotional wound, the narrative question that's at the heart of your story, and you just do not look away from it for a single page. See, since you don't have that whole web of subplots to keep the reader hooked, something else has to do the heavy lifting. And that something is voice. The narrator's voice has to be so compelling, so unique, and so strong that it can pull the reader all the way through from beginning to end. It's not just important, in a novella, it is absolutely everything. All right, let's be real for a minute. Let's get back to that disreputable literary banana republic Stephen King was talking about. Because we have to be honest here. Writing a great novella is one thing, but getting it published? That is a whole different ballgame. And look, the data really drives this point home. This survey from 2018 of romance readers showed that almost 83% prefer standard novels. Only about 20% prefer novellas. Big publishers see numbers like that, and they get nervous, because it's really hard to charge full price for a shorter book, even if the production costs are pretty much the same. That's just the tough market reality. But, and this is a big but, that is not the end of the story, not even close. There are dedicated pathways out there for novellas. There are dozens of amazing small presses that champion this form. In genres like sci-fi and fantasy, publishers like Tor.com have built their entire brand around it. Not to mention, prestigious contests can launch a career, and for self-publishing, novellas can be huge, especially as a way to start a series. So the path might be a little narrower, but it is absolutely there. So as we start to wrap this up, let's just reframe this whole idea. What if the novella's so-called weaknesses, its short length, its constraints, are actually its greatest artistic strengths? That tight focus creates an emotional intensity that can sometimes get watered down in a sprawling 500-page novel. The structure is so clean and transparent that you can really appreciate the artistry behind it. And this quote from Dina Druis of Novella Press, it just nails it. She says the best novellas are exactly the length they're supposed to be. A writer isn't trying to write a book that's hard to sell. They're writing the story until there is nothing left to add and nothing left to take away. The length isn't a flaw, it's a sign of artistic integrity. So, ultimately, I think it all comes down to this simple question, for writers and for readers. Every story has its own natural, organic shape and size. The challenge, and really the joy of it, is to listen closely enough to hear what that is. So, are you listening?